This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, and we take a look at the political pieces we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 7th of May 2020, and I am DM.
I am JM.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, how Eastleigh went south. In the Standard, warning shot. And in the Star, Tuju, where Uhuru-RUTO war started. Interesting.
Very interesting headlines.
Shall we begin with the Star?
Yes.
Yes, please.
So, Tuju, where Uhuru-RUTO war started. Raphael Tuju, speaking during a Ramogi Baraza, a popular law talk show this week, told Kenyans that the Jubilee Party troubles began with a handshake. The anti-handshake team are orchestrating the current infighting in the party, he says. Tuju also disclosed that all key decisions within the party are sanctioned by the president. So we can take that to mean that the change of the members of the National Management Committee, which happened last week, came from the top, number one himself. Meanwhile, the Star is also telling us that the deputy president has defied a directive to make contributions through the COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund set up by the national government. RUTO has instead been distributing food through a network of religious institutions and politicians across the country.
Yeah, I saw that an informant within said that last week they reached 11,752 families. And this week, 16,600 families. I mean, they're doing better than the Red Cross. You know, the other thing he said is that the giving is secretive. They're not allowed
it's quiet.
It's quiet, which is great. That's the good kind of giving. But then it's leaked. So is it on purpose?
Conveniently leaked, perhaps. Conveniently. I mean, for me, I feel like as long as he is giving back, that's a bonus. And I think he's decided he's going to capitalize on this politically as well. On Tuju's remarks on where the war started, I feel like maybe the original sin wasn't even a handshake. I feel like maybe the DP has quietly been uneasy about the things that have been happening. And perhaps, you know, the original sin was actually at the beginning when he realized he had a raw deal. Yeah, you're
actually right, because the handshake was a sign that things had already gone wrong, not the beginning of things going wrong. If things were fine from the onset, then there would be no handshake, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe the trouble is that he broke into the bedroom of Uhuru Kenyatta once he was in the Jubilee Party. You know, let me explain. Let me break it down. He basically masterminded and orchestrated who would become the new leaders in central Kenya, right?
During the election.
During the 2017 election. So he bankrolled a lot of nominations. He made sure that you had a lot of newcomers who are not beholden to the president, but beholden to him. And maybe that's where his trouble began. You don't break into other people's bedrooms.
So, we have a 3-part criteria that we're going to use to break down the headlines. We will ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? What do we think about that headline?
Old news.
Yeah, old news, nothing new.
Yeah.
Although the Star is doing better with the headlines.
Yeah, less mouthful.
Yes, less.
But
so if we move to the Daily Nation, and we're being told Eastleigh has gone south. And this is after yesterday's statement saying that there will be a containment strategy, or there will be a lockdown in Eastleigh and Old Town. And now both these areas are predominantly very Muslim. We are going through the Ramadan period at this time, but yet the cases have gone up in these two areas. And the reason, the Daily Nation says, is perhaps because of the high level of communal living that is happening in these two areas. So people living very close together, sharing meals, especially at iftar, I'm sure
festivities,
after, you know, they're trying to celebrate, trying to
close the fast.
Yes, and inviting their friends over, sharing food. But this is also how COVID-19 really spreads. So the government has decided to lock down. Now the interesting thing here was that statement went out around 4 o'clock. And people rushed out of those two areas trying to beat the lockdown, the containment, which I think then will mean we'll see spikes of cases.
Counterproductive.
In other areas. I think the idea is, as much as, you know, we Christians had Easter and it was also a new normal for them, I think Muslims should also try and see a new way of celebrating
in small
iftar,
numbers.
in small numbers.
So perhaps the announcement should have been made at 6:45 in the evening.
Limited amount of time.
Yeah, so that there's no movement at curfew time.
Yeah, and the Daily Nation also had cited saying that intelligence sources had been saying that people are saying a lot of people from Mogadishu have come into the country, and this is what is causing the influx in cases in these two areas. But they said that they can't confirm that. So, But if that is the case, that means our border patrols are
still porous, even at this time when we're fighting a pandemic.
Yeah.
The Standard is actually on the same story. The headline is warning shot, and it's referring to the government's decision to lock down the two spaces that you have just described, GK. And so they're calling the move, it's a yellow card move. The government is basically saying that if Kenyans do not comply in the containment or in the strategies that the government has put forward in the containment of COVID-19, then the government will have no choice than to escalate the restriction measures,
so it could get
which
worse.
means a red card, a total and absolute lockdown.
Yeah. I've been saying there are two groups of people now. Group 1 are the frontline workers. Group 2 is the rest of us, right? And it's our job as Group 2 to buy Group 1 more time.
Yes.
The idea about flattening the curve is so that we don't overwhelm the health system. So that's why you're being told stay home.
Yeah.
Wear your mask correctly.
Yeah.
That is why it is important.
Yeah, and the numbers are quite worrying.
Yeah.
And the threat is real. Yesterday in New York, lost over 200 New Yorkers in one day.
In one day.
So may we not get there.
Yes. So who do we give our winning headline? I quite like the Daily Nation.
Yeah,
I like
we'll give the
the play on Eastleigh and going south. Standard coming in.
I agree on the Daily Nation.
Okay. So Daily Nation gives us our winning headline.
Yeah.
Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy?
The Daily Nation.
Yes.
We have Mutahi Moses Kagwe, and he's holding 2 tablets. Perhaps the 10 commandments of COVID. Wash your hands, stay at home, and all those things.
Wear a mask.
And under that, there's the Kenyans, the Israelites, the Kenyanites, who he's trying to lead to the promised land. But in front of them are 2 bottles of beers and a sausage. And Mutahi Moses Kagwe is shocked. He's like, really?
No,
really?
You know, at first I thought that really was a reference to an English word. And then I remembered, actually,
where the CS is from.
Yeah, he's very upset that people are going to
very charming.
to Italy's.
Kenyans, why are you making our CS so mad? Not our father that he should lecture us every time he speaks. Do your parts. But very funny.
Yeah.
And you can see the 2 beers and the sausage.
Yeah. So this is in reference to Mutahi Kagwe's press statement yesterday, where he said that there are some Kenyans who are taking advantage of the alcohol with a meal. You can only be served alcohol if you're having a meal.
Yeah.
So they're going to order the minimum meal that they can, like a singular sausage with the multiple bottles of beers, and then they go to other restaurants. So finding a loophole and defying the measures that have been put out to contain COVID.
No more orange and a beer. And 2 beers.
Yeah.
Then we have Gado in the Standard. And he's drawn for us President Bush caricature in 2002. And he's saying Saddam Hussein has chemical weapons. And then in recent times, you have Trump saying COVID-19 virus originated from a Chinese lab. And you can see our little animation guy there. And he says, and there's a coalition of the willing to back up the claims. Okay.
So he's telling us that, back then Bush was telling us this with the plan to invade Iraq. And now Trump is telling us this, insisting that the Chinese are responsible. So what is the next plan? Is there an economic invasion?
Disaster capitalism at its best.
At work. In the Star, there is a fat Kenyan. This is still on the same theme as the Daily Nation. There's a fat Kenyan there eating sausage. He has 2 sausages in total and 7 bottles of beer. And Mutahi Kagwe is there at the back, shocked and perplexed. But the man who's indulging is saying, did I talk of your 4 million tea? So essentially Ozone is saying that Mutahi Kagwe should look away from Kenyans defying the rules because the Kenyans looked out. I don't know what this commentary is supposed to be.
This is so silly. Honestly, he's
silly
trying to save your lives, and you're talking about, budget. I know it's apples and oranges for me.
Yeah.
Him trying to keep you safe, and the 4 million T are two things that should not be compared.
And of course we still say again that argument that money was embezzled because 4 million, how much? 2 million was spent on tea.
Yeah, so 4 is even the wrong number.
Yeah, 2 million shillings for tea for a month for 500 people comes to, if it's 22 working days, and I think they're working round the clock, is 300 shillings per person.
They're doing night shifts as well.
And yes, 300 shillings per person. Are they not supposed to eat?
Yeah. And I think this is also government's time to step up and just break down these numbers.
Yeah.
So don't put out a budget and whatnot and not explain.
And leave it out there for us poor Kenyans to break down huge figures that are mind-boggling.
Just come and tell us where it went. Yeah. So who do we give? I quite like the Daily Nation. Yeah. Moses Mutahi Kagwe gives us our winning cartoon. Yeah. What is our final thought?
Our final thought is inspired by the book How We Got to Now, 6 Innovations That Made the Modern World by Stephen Johnson. So the book reveals how many hidden connections between the innovations we take for granted in our modern world. And it shows how innovations can have unexpected applications, and that the consequences of an innovation are almost impossible to predict. I mean, who would have predicted in the 1980s how pervasive the internet would be now?
Yeah.
So I looked at a very interesting chapter called Cold. In this chapter, the author demonstrates or explains how innovations can inspire other innovations in very unexpected ways. So in the process of innovating one thing, further down the road, an even bigger thing is innovated accidentally, a happy accident. For example, did you know that frozen fish and family planning have a lot in common? I'll tell you why. So there was once a man called Clarence, a naturalist. He went fishing in the northernmost part of Canada, those parts of Canada that can get up to -40 degrees. This was in the early 1900s. So he went fishing with the locals, the Inuits, and they fished through holes on ice. So as he was fishing, he noticed that when he caught the fish, the ambient temperature made the fish freeze immediately. As soon as the fish hits the air, it froze over. Later, when he thawed the fish to have for dinner or lunch later down the road, he noticed that the quickly frozen fish was so much tastier than the frozen fish that he would have back home. And this is how the idea of flash freezing was conceived, which Clarence went on to patent and change the entire industry around freezing food. But this innovation didn't only change how people consume food, it also changed how people procreate. Flash freezing works well for meat and produce, but it also is an effective way to preserve human eggs, like human semen and eggs, through a process called oocyte cryopreservation. So this revolutionized family planning. The process allows, for instance, for women and men to save their eggs when they are younger and use it much later in life. So it's generally given people more family planning or life planning options.
Nice. So in the next innovation he talks about is sound. And here he talks about everything from the telephone and how the telephone technology sort of revolution, right?
That word.
Wow, yeah. Basically how the telephone changed and spun a lot of innovations. But then he talks about how there may be more Chinese baby boys because of the Titanic, and I'll tell you why.
What?
So we all know the story of the Titanic and its sinking, and you've watched probably the film a million times and probably watched a lot of documentaries, but neither of them mention a man named Reginald Fessenden, and he was a Canadian who came up, who was inspired to come up with sonar technology. And he was a pioneer in wireless radio, and he used this knowledge of sound engineering to develop this new technology. So sonar works by echolocation. A ship sends out a sonic pulse, which then bounces off any object and creates an echo. And this innovation would have saved the Titanic had it been invented at the time, because the ship would have been able to locate the iceberg before hitting it. And so this sonar technology was then used to create an innovation that we all know as the ultrasound. And the ultrasound is commonly used to show how the baby is progressing in the tummy, and even determine the sex of a baby before it's born. So interestingly, he makes a connection between the ultrasound and China's one-child policy. So China used to have a one-child policy, and Chinese parents had a preference for boys. So it meant that this technology was now being applied in a very devastating way, in which the parents would actually practice abortions that were sex selective. So if it was a girl, you would abort. If it was a boy, you would keep it. So much so that this resulted in a 118 to 100 ratio between boys and girls in China. Now the lesson here is that the invention of the sonar was driven by a sincere desire to avoid tragedy, such as what happened with the Titanic. But however, an inventor can never not know or control the full effects of his innovation and how it will be used later down the line. And so, unfortunately, the best inventions can have some unintended negative consequences and repercussions. So that's what I took away from the book, from Sound.
So my key takeaway was the 3 cumulative inventions that enabled us to achieve better living conditions. The candle, the electric bulb, and flash photography, basically light. Before the electric bulb was invented, the author tells us, we relied primarily on candles. Candles were initially made from a waxy substance known as spermaceti. Now, spermaceti is a white waxy substance produced by the sperm whale. But whale hunting was a dangerous pursuit, and therefore candles were a rare luxury and highly valued. So not everybody could afford them.
Only rich people had candles.
Only the richer people in society could access them, and that had an effect on economic activity, which was therefore slightly depressed as soon as night set in. As well as even literacy levels, which shot up then as soon as the electric bulb was commercialized in the 1880s. So the electric bulb was then commercialized in the 1880s, and that transformed the whole lighting situation, made that more accessible. And then the invention of that light bulb also led to flash photography, which inspired a great social reform in the United States. So flash photography was invented by an astronomer and innovator known as Charles Smith, who in the late 1800s, while visiting the Great Pyramids in Giza, mixed magnesium and gunpowder to create a mini explosion to illuminate the vast king's chamber so that he could photograph it. And later, a journalist by the name Jacob Riis in New York used that mechanism to chronicle the terrible living conditions in the 5 Points neighborhood in New York. So he had been writing extensively about the squalor in that neighborhood, but nobody would believe him, because to see is to believe.
So he had to take pictures.
And he had to take pictures.
So, but the place was dark.
So he found out about flash photography, and he now took photographs of those spaces. And finally, in the year 1901, the New York State Tenement House Act was passed with overwhelming support, which gave that region of New York far better living conditions.
Wow, fantastic. Nice. So on a day where we had a winning headline and a winning cartoon from the Daily Nation, a double win, I want to leave you with this. Innovations usually begin life with an attempt to solve a specific problem. But once they get into circulation, they end up triggering other changes, and it's difficult to predict how far they go and how much of an impact they have, and what other innovations come from it. But it doesn't mean that we should stop innovating, and I think that's what this book shows us. So please have a lovely evening. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, but find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Prime Feature Air, and StarTimes.